Today we're going to be discussing some technical analysis going into Tuesday for the SPY, Qs, Apple, Tesla, and NVIDIA. So if you are watching this Tuesday night or Wednesday morning and you want to see my latest video, you're going to want to click the link down in my description, okay? Let's get started. I forgot, but we need to talk about yields because they are skyrocketing, okay? We are up in this unknown area, which we stated that once we get up there, we're going to see some bad stuff happen, and that's exactly what happened last week, okay? But we are coming into the top of our channel here, so maybe it is time for these yields to start to meet up with some old moving average, possibly come back to its 20. It is possible it comes to the bottom of its channel. I'm kind of thinking that's a little bit unlikely, but we ought to be open to everything. Most likely this is going to come back down and meet up with some moving average, maybe retest this high, and then we can see that go just a little bit higher. The reason I think we have room to go a little bit higher is because we haven't hit my target down here of 88.14, and we have TLT also closing on the low. Now, TLT, if we do see that pullback, we could see it fill one, maybe even two gaps here, and then give us another move to the downside. Overall, what I'm paying attention to on TLT, since it is the inverse of that 10-year yield, is I'm just looking for it to set up some kind of daily divergence down here. That was a big line. I'm looking for it to set up some kind of daily divergence with this low and some low down in here. Hopefully that does set up, because I believe that will be a very good trade, and then we can look at yields starting to really start to come down, which could signal us towards recession. Let's talk about something you're really interested in, though, the SPY. Okay, the SPY actually did break down a little bit in the morning, and we did see that buy back up. We'll get into shorter time frames, but right now, the overall thing that looks like could happen is we are starting to get that bounce. And if you were subscribed yesterday, I actually put out a video last night saying we look like we're going to bounce. We could dip in the morning, but then we might bounce. So the fact that we did see a lot of, still not the best buying, but we want to see some extension upward from this move, possibly to come fill this gap, which will meet up pretty in line with these moving averages we have. And notice these moving averages are all starting to point down, which just tells us that we can expect any pop here to be met up with some sellers. Now, we could go as high as that gap fill. I don't want to deter you from thinking, though, we could go for a full retest and reconnect with our 50. It's possible that we go and fill this gap up here, but I just think that with the bearish state, we are just going to meet up with possibly the 50 and then start to crash down to lower levels and meet up with that 200 way down here near, what is that, 418. On the SPY, we are seeing divergence on shorter time frames. The overall one that I wanted to see was the 15-minute here, and the reason I was paying attention to the 15-minute was because of this trend line here, and my thinking was, if this thing is able to break by the end of the day, then the upside looks like the direction we want to go for the next few days or even just a day or two. So what I think will most likely play out from here is we will at least come up and get that gap fill by the end of the week. And that would actually make sense, because this yellow line here is the monthly expected moves priced in from the options. Okay, so we wouldn't be surprised for this to come back into there by Friday, because I believe that is the last day of our trading month here. We could extend as high as a retest. Overall, the retest here would meet us up with the 50, and then maybe we see that second plunge to the downside, because now we are pulled out of oversold conditions. Even though I am leaning towards the bear side after this bounce, we could see this start to extend to the upside, and the overall sign for that, at least looking at the Qs, would most likely be we actually move past all these moving averages, get some kind of pullback, and we're able to burst through this. And then once we get through that, maybe you get a little retest, and then you want to cut above this high here. I just believe that we are in so much of a state of rates are going to be raised. Those rates are all the way up in the unknown, so I'm not banking on that, but I am open to the possibility of a bullish case playing out in front of us in the future. With the Qs for this bounce, which is what I overall believe it is, so even though I just gave you a bullish case, I'm still thinking that this will set up a lower high. We need this 2 hour to curl over, and if that after looks like the post market is kind of getting some buying into it, so we could see this start to curl up. We can even see a gap up possibly tomorrow to go and fill this gap, and maybe that's all we get and it starts to fade right away. I overall still believe that we are going to go and meet up with our moving averages at some point. We are pretty far away from it, and actually something I can do for you guys is I wanted to pull up my Bollinger Bands here and just show you, if we would have looked at the SPY, it actually is more outside of it, but you can see today we were very outside of it, and a lot of the times when we do get outside of these Bollinger Bands here, we want to reconnect with at least the 50, or most of the time it's the 20, but we can reconnect with the 50. So as you can see, this high right here, we got out of it for actually a few days, so you can stay out of it. But overall, we are going to end up moving towards our 20 at some point. Right here, we're out of it. We're seeing this bounce start to come to fruition. So maybe since we're out of it, we are going to come and reconnect with that 20 or even the 50, or touch this upper trend line here. And then that gives us our lower high to bring us down to the downside. Apple on the daily is a little trickier because we're not outside of those Bollinger Bands. We're right in the middle. We're kind of just stuck in a range here. So overall, what I'm going to be paying attention to is these breaks to the upside or a break to the downside. Downside being, we're going to go straight for that 200. Okay, I believe that that's going to happen if this range we're in kind of breaks. And then if we do break to the upside, we could go directly up towards our gap fill. And we could even possibly go into our resistance zone and maybe even fill that gap from a while ago. And the reason that this could happen is because I believe the Magnificent Seven are going to be the stocks that really lead this charge if we do get this bounce. So I think that Apple actually could see some pretty good upside as well as other stocks. As I zoom into a 30-minute, what I was paying attention to today was we got this plunge upward and we started to see it pull back, which I wasn't really worried about. I believe that most of the time we get into this top area, we do see some kind of pullback before we go higher. So I wouldn't be surprised for this to come to the bottom of its range. But I was paying attention to this MACD on the 30-minute, and I was like, okay, if this crosses, we are starting to see some big probabilities to the bottom of this actually breaking. And as you can see at the very end of the day, let's pull it up. I think it was literally like the last 5 minutes. It was the last 5 minutes of the day. We actually unconfirmed that move in the 30-minute, and we saw this big spike here, which fully unconfirmed that move. So like we said last time this happened, if you were subscribed, you would have heard the last time we talked about when this likes to reject. We actually are short-term bullish when that happens, especially your short-term, because it's on the 30-minute. Most likely we could see a jut up to the top of this range, and then what we want to see from there is some consolidation and then spring us to the upside to go fill some of those gaps. I'm just going to bring up Tesla on the 15-minute, but we really didn't see much divergence or anything like that. We just said that this thing's extremely oversold and we might see a wedge forming that could break to the upside or downside. And it looked like we got a little fake out in the morning. It looked like it broke out pretty quickly to the downside. I think this was almost 2%. So that was a pretty big breakdown. And then we started to buy back up above some of our support here. And then we started to trickle up. We started to kind of get out of that wedge and base out. And then we saw that last little 5-minute move just like Apple had. So maybe, just maybe, Tesla wants to come up and get a full retest. But as long as I'm paying attention to it, I'm paying attention to this right in here. This price point of about 261.83 is where I'm going to be looking at, which is Tesla's gap fill. So I believe that we could see some resistance there, and maybe that triggers us to the downside, but it also could just be a little another point of consolidation to spring us for that full retest of our broken channel. One stock that I thought looked pretty good was Amazon, and you know this Amazon is the one that I use to play this slight downfall that we had in the last week or so. And what I started to notice on Amazon yesterday was we had a nice little wedge forming, but on Amazon we had that divergence. So we did see that start to play up out to the upside. It went up like 1 point. It was almost up 2% for this to play out. And then I just drew my little line across, and I started to think, oh, if this comes up to our resistance up ahead, maybe we start to form a left shoulder head and even a right shoulder somewhere down in here that then projects us to the upside. So I wouldn't be surprised for stocks who want to come back down just a little bit more to find some more buyers and then spring up. But right now it's looking like that reaction at the end of the day is possibly going to spring us to the upside. Overall on Amazon, my price target for this is just the gap fill right at the top here around 135.30. Now we could come and get that full retest, which has a pretty high probability right now of happening. And then in order to get fully bullish, we're going to need this to slightly pull back and then start to head to the upsides. Okay, now we get to get into NVIDIA. And on NVIDIA, we've been paying attention to a possible left shoulder head and a right shoulder forming. And as you can see, I have a little trend line, recent trend line drawn down here, and we aren't able to get above that. So maybe tomorrow's the day we're able to gap up. I do believe we are going to see this start to fall to the downside once we do get a lower high. But overall, I believe that NVIDIA is probably going to come up to this price point of about 470 to 471, and that's where it will most likely run into some trouble. But we want to be very careful when we do see a reversal here, because we could just see this pop up to the 50 somewhere around 451. And then we want to be paying attention for when this neckline breaks. Maybe we get a retest, and then we can head down to our 200 that will be curling over, probably somewhere around, I'll just say 330. Here you can see that little trend that's going on the 2 hour a little bit better, okay? We're struggling to cross through that. So I believe that if we are able to cross through that tomorrow, maybe we do pop up, get a slight retest, and then we start to extend to higher levels. I think we're going to move to the upside decently quick. So maybe some of the data we get this week comes out slightly good for the market, and then we get some more data later in the week that is bad for the market. But like I said, I just follow price. I don't make any trades based on what I think is going to happen. I just look at the stocks in front of me. So overall, when I say that I am in a bearish state, meaning I think that this soon bounce will fade, what I'm overall saying to you is if it doesn't fade and I start to see things switch over to bullish, I will be telling you guys that I am switching over to bullish and giving you guys examples of what I think is going to happen. But right now, it is looking like we are going to get a lower high, probably up towards that 470 price mark, and then we could see that start to come down to the downside. It is important to be open to the bullish case. If this daily is able to roll over, then we probably are seeing one more extension to the upside for NVIDIA before we get any kind of pullback. So we want to be open to everything. It's just right now I'm seeing things as rather bearish after what Jerome Powell said last week. So I think that whatever bounce we get is going to fail and give us some kind of lower high. And a big reason that I'm saying that we probably are going to get that bounce is actually the VIX, okay? We see this big wick where we could not get above the 200, and we need to get above the 200 and be able to close above the 200 in order to get above 20 and get that full volatility back in the market, okay? So if we just look back in time just a little bit, we can see we dink that 200 and we come off it with a big wick. What happens? We start to drift off for a few days, okay? So I would expect this to be a signal that we are going to see some kind of bounce, and we're going to go meet up with our moving averages down here, and then we'll see that start to skyrocket above 20 in the near future. If we are going with a another little bull rally, then all we're going to see is this start to fully roll over and start to come down into these areas, and then this will set up some kind of daily divergence that will most likely spring us to the upside. Overall, the economy and the market, we're not in a healthy spot. So either way that this plays out, we are going to be crashing to lower levels in the next year. All right, the main takeaway for this video is we are probably going to get a small bounce that I believe will be a lower high to send us to the downside one more time before we see maybe a more meaningful bounce off of our 200. Overall, I'm still open to a bullish case, but I just think that with all the bearishness, and especially what Jerome Powell said last week, that we need to see bounces as there are sellers ahead of us, and we are most likely heading into a headwind on the bullish side for the short term. Thanks for watching the whole video. Make sure to hit that like button. It really helps me out, and I hope you guys have a great day trading tomorrow, okay? Peace.